21 years ago, a teenage girl in Dallas vanished after a night shift, leaving behind her black Pontiac, abandoned like an empty shell in the city. A massive search with police dogs, helicopters, and hundreds of volunteers yielded no answers, only rumors and unease gripping the community. Contradictory clues, a mysterious red pickup truck, and a case relegated to cold case status left the victim's family in despair for 2 decades. Yet, they never gave up, lighting candles each year to keep their daughter's memory alive. Then, when modern forensic technology was applied, a seemingly minor detail pulled the case back into focus, revealing shocking truths Dallas was unprepared to face. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. On September 12, 2004, Dallas was cloaked in the muggy air of late summer, the sky heavy with lingering clouds still damp from an afternoon shower. Lower Greenville Street glowed with neon lights from bars, shops, and restaurants, all reflecting off the wet pavement. Inside a small coffee shop on the corner, 19-year-old Rebecca Wright finished her weekend shift. She untied her cloth apron, placed it neatly on the counter, tucked her server's notepad into her bag, and flashed a smile to bid her young co-workers goodbye as they cleaned up. "See you tomorrow," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the coffee grinder and the clatter of chairs. A few regular customers nodded to her as they left, unaware it was the last time they'd see Rebecca in her usual gentle demeanor as a freshman college student. Rebecca slung a faded canvas backpack over her shoulder, containing a few textbooks, an empty lunchbox, and a handkerchief her mother had given her, then stepped out of the shop. That moment was captured by a blurry security camera mounted on the awning, a long-haired brunette, slender, hurrying toward her black Pontiac Grand Am parked nearby. The car was old, its paint peeling, but to Rebecca, it was a source of pride and a small taste of freedom her parents had scrimped to provide. The footage showed her opening the door, sliding into the driver's seat, and turning on the headlights, briefly glaring the screen before the door closed, leaving a thick silence. About 10 minutes later, a neighborhood resident heard an engine roar and tires screech, the urgent sound echoing through old brick buildings, startling him awake. He looked out his window, but the darkness had swallowed the street, leaving only the faint red glow of a distant traffic signal. No one called the police, as nighttime noises in Dallas, illegal street races, or minor fender benders were commonplace. But this time, every trace of Rebecca vanished completely. No footage of her appeared on traffic cameras after 11 p.m. No texts were sent, no calls made from the small phone she always carried. Lower Greenville Street pulsed with hurried footsteps, laughter, and thumping music. But Rebecca's absence left a chilling void. A young woman disappeared into the night, as if erased from the city's map, leaving behind a quieting coffee shop, a blurry camera that couldn't tell the full story, and questions no one could answer. The next morning, as sunlight poured through the windows, Linda Wright realized her daughter hadn't come home. Rebecca had never stayed out overnight without notice, and her absence sent the family into immediate panic. Her room was untouched from the night before, the bed neatly made, textbooks open on her desk with half-written notes, and a ballpoint pen hastily placed between pages. Everything suggested Rebecca would return any moment, except she never did. When Linda opened a small drawer, she froze upon finding her daughter's wallet and her familiar phone, dead and half-plugged into its charger. For a 19-year-old, leaving behind both wallet and phone to go somewhere at night was unthinkable. Linda frantically called her husband, Robert Wright, who was preparing for his morning shift. With one exchanged glance, they knew something terrible loomed. Rebecca was never reckless or impulsive. She was so cautious, she always called her mother if she'd be late. Robert immediately contacted Rebecca's close friends, while Linda reached out to nearby relatives. No one knew anything. Some classmates mentioned Rebecca had talked about an upcoming exam, with no plans to go out or stay over with friends. Even David Garcia, Rebecca's ex-boyfriend, was stunned when contacted, insisting he hadn't seen her in weeks, and had no idea where she was. His response didn't ease their fears, as both Linda and Robert recalled the heated arguments between their daughter and the young man before their breakup. By 10 a.m., unable to delay further, the Wrights rushed to the Dallas police station to report her missing. In a stark room lit by fluorescent lights, a young Lieutenant Collins listened and jotted down Linda's account, the time Rebecca finished her shift, the black Pontiac Grand Am, and minor details like the clothes she wore the previous night. Collins opened an official case, labeled Missing Adult, Endangered, and promised an urgent search. He asked the family to provide Rebecca's most recent photo for a bulletin and ordered his team to review traffic cameras around Lower Greenville. Another team was sent to check city hospitals and morgues for unidentified individuals. All returned with the same answer: no matches. As police began interviewing witnesses, the Wrights' home became a hub for relatives and neighbors. Some brought bread, others coffee, filling the living room with shared anxiety. On the wall, Rebecca's high school graduation photo, with her radiant smile, cut like a knife into the hearts of those gathered. Linda clutched her daughter's handkerchief, eyes red, staring at the front door, hoping for a familiar figure to appear. Robert sat silently on the sofa, hands trembling, his face struggling to stay composed, but his eyes bloodshot. By afternoon, police reported that the search continued, with police dogs deployed to a park near Rebecca's college route, but no leads surfaced. Linda felt her world collapse, knowing each passing hour diminished the chance of finding her daughter safe. As darkness fell over Dallas again, the Wright family sat together in silence. In the quiet house, only the ticking of a wall clock rang clear, underscoring a brutal truth: Rebecca was gone, and the real nightmare was just beginning. The next morning, September 13th, Dallas awoke in unease, as Rebecca's disappearance spread across news outlets. Outside the Wrights' suburban home in East Dallas, police cars lined up, forensic teams and helicopters buzzing overhead. The quiet neighborhood became the epicenter of a massive search. Radios crackled, blending with the whir of chopper blades, as officers fanned out across Lower Greenville, scouring alleys and parking lots for any sign of Rebecca Wright or her black Pontiac Grand Am. Meanwhile, dozens of volunteers, many classmates and neighbors, gathered at the Wrights' doorstep to collect flyers. Hastily printed sheets bearing Rebecca's graduation photo, her bright smile, and the words, "Missing, have you seen me?" were distributed everywhere. Gas stations, bus stops, convenience stores, even plastered over utility poles. People flocked to White Rock Lake, a popular spot with winding trails, to search. Under the harsh Texas sun, groups walked in lines, calling Rebecca's name, hoping for a response from somewhere. Nearby, the Trinity River became a focal point. Small rescue boats glided along the murky water, eyes scanning for stray logs or unusual ripples. Yet all efforts met silence. In front of the Wrights' home, local reporters crowded, cameras aimed at the closed door. Questions rang out. Does the family have a message for the public? Any updates from the police? Linda couldn't face them, so an aunt stepped in, reading a brief plea. If anyone has any information, please call us. Rebecca is a kind girl who never made enemies. We just want to bring her home safe. Those words aired that night on the Dallas Morning News and local TV, sparking a wave of community concern. Police received hundreds of calls in the first 48 hours, mostly false leads or rumors. But one call caught investigator Collins' attention. A middle-aged man reported seeing a black Pontiac speeding unusually fast, near midnight on the road to I-30 toward Garland. He recalled it nearly hitting a median before swerving onto an exit. This tip was logged, opening a new search direction eastward. Meanwhile, a search team with dogs was dispatched along I-30. The dogs sniffed along the roadside grass, occasionally barking at odd scents, but analysis led nowhere. A strong smell of gasoline near the Garland exit sparked hope it was Rebecca's Pontiac, but tests revealed it was from a minor crash days earlier. Each flicker of hope faded, sinking the Wright family deeper into despair. By day 3, the search expanded over a 20-mile radius. Police knocked on doors, questioned cab drivers, and checked gas station cameras. But 2004's technology was rudimentary. Many cameras were too blurry to show license plates or Rebecca's figure. Evening news called the case a puzzle without answers, fueling public fear. At night, when streetlights flickered on quiet roads, the Wright home became a refuge for family, friends, and volunteers. They sat in groups, awaiting police updates, but received only curt reports. "We're still searching." On the dining table, leftover flyers lay scattered beside a cold cup of coffee. Linda had poured but couldn't drink. Her anxiety grew, knowing the longer this dragged on, the slimmer Rebecca's chances of survival. Helicopters kept circling, dogs continued sniffing under flashlights, and reporters camped at the street's edge, but all revolved around one truth. Rebecca Wright was gone, and aside from a vague report of her Pontiac speeding toward Garland, no solid evidence guided the investigation. Dallas grew cloaked in a chilling realization: a 19-year-old could vanish in a bustling city, leaving her family and community helplessly grasping for answers. As the search stretched into the fourth day with no clear results, Dallas police shifted focus to those directly connected to Rebecca. First on the list was David Garcia, her ex-boyfriend. That morning, David was called in for questioning. In a room bathed in dim yellow light from a weary bulb, the 20-year-old sat across from Lieutenant Collins, wearing a wrinkled shirt, hands fidgeting with a key. Collins cut to the chase. Where was David from 10 p.m. on September 12th to the next morning? He claimed he was at a classmate's house, playing video games late before crashing there. When police verified, the friend confirmed meeting David but couldn't pinpoint the exact time, as they'd been drinking beer and memory was fuzzy. This shaky alibi raised Collins' suspicions. David insisted he'd ended things with Rebecca weeks earlier, had no contact, and no reason to harm her. But Collins noted in his report, statement not fully convincing, alibi uncertain. While David was questioned, another lead emerged from the coffee shop where Rebecca worked. A server named Maria told police that days before Rebecca vanished, she had a heated argument with a middle-aged man who frequented the shop. Maria recalled him being in his 40s, with graying hair, wearing a checkered shirt, always sitting in the far corner. That day Rebecca approached his table, exchanged words, and tension escalated. Rebecca frowned. He slammed his hand on the table, drawing glances from other patrons. Maria didn't catch the conversation, but saw Rebecca walk away irritated, and the man left soon after. When asked if she knew his name, Maria shook her head, noting he wasn't a long-time regular, only appearing in recent weeks. The middle-aged man was added to the case file, but tracking him in a city like Dallas was like finding a needle in a haystack. Police cross-checked criminal records near the area, but no one matched perfectly. They showed Maria stacks of photos, but she couldn't identify him. Meanwhile, public pressure mounted. Headlines screamed, "Rebecca Wright, 19, vanishes mysteriously, suspicions swirl." David Garcia's name began circulating in whispers, due to rumors of his intense jealousy when Rebecca made new friends. David faced scrutiny from neighbors and classmates, despite his protests of innocence. In a brief press conference outside the police station, Collins was asked if David was the prime suspect. He replied vaguely, "We're exploring all possibilities. No one's ruled out, nor confirmed, until we have evidence." This only fueled speculation. The Wrights, when asked, didn't know what to think. Through tears, Linda said she couldn't believe David would do something so horrific, but she couldn't rule it out entirely. Robert stayed silent, his face taut, as if wanting to believe his daughter hadn't fallen into the hands of someone she once knew, yet fear lingered. In the following days, police pursued leads on the mysterious middle-aged man. They questioned coffee shop staff and regulars, but descriptions were vague, and no one recalled specifics. The shop's camera footage was too blurry to identify faces. The investigation stalled. Collins noted internally, suspects identified, leads pursued, but insufficient evidence to charge. More time needed. Dallas remained gripped by unease. Whispers swirled about the ex-boyfriend with a shaky alibi and the mysterious man who appeared and vanished. But nothing concrete brought Rebecca back, and the case file grew thicker with pages, but no real progress. What began as an urgent, bustling search showed signs of stalling, leaving the Wrights trapped in a spiral of rumors, suspicion, and deepening fear. 4 days after Rebecca's disappearance, a sudden call reached the Dallas police from a resident near Tennyson Park, about 8 miles east of the Lower Greenville coffee shop. The man reported seeing a black car parked on a grassy edge, looking abandoned overnight. When police arrived, their hearts raced. It was Rebecca's 1988 Pontiac Grand Am. The familiar car sat silently under a tree, morning dew clouding its windshield, exuding an eerie sense of a mystery waiting to be solved. Officers quickly cordoned off the area, with yellow tape as curious onlookers gathered at a distance. The car was locked, with no signs of tampering. When opened, the interior was nearly empty. Rebecca's wallet and phone, already found in her room, weren't there, only some old cassette tapes, a water bottle in the door pocket, and the thin jacket she often wore to work. The driver's seat was adjusted for her petite frame, suggesting she had driven it that night, not someone else. The forensic team began their examination. They dusted for fingerprints on the steering wheel, gear shift and doors, but the results were chaotic. Rebecca's prints, those of friends who'd ridden with her, and several unidentified ones, not in the criminal database. Each unfamiliar print sparked hope, only to fade when no matches were found. Investigator Collins noted, "Too many unclear prints, difficult to trace origins." A closer look revealed no blood, no signs of a struggle. The back seat and trunk were clean. The car's floor had a few specks of red dirt, possibly from Rebecca stepping in from a lot. Police tested the soil against various locations, but results were unremarkable. This puzzled everyone. The car seemed simply abandoned, with no trace of a crime. Locals around the park were questioned, but no one saw when the car was left. An elderly woman across from the park vaguely recalled hearing an engine after midnight, but saw only the dark car parked, empty. Her statement was noted, but too vague to serve as evidence. The Wright family arrived at the scene that afternoon, kept at a safe distance by police. Linda's legs nearly gave out seeing the familiar Pontiac. She whispered to her husband, "It's still here, but where's our girl?" Robert, silent, gripped her hand, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the car as if it could answer. To them the Pontiac, once a symbol of Rebecca's growing independence, now stood for loss and mystery. Media swarmed instantly. Morning headlines blared, "Missing student's car found, but Rebecca remains missing." Images of the Pontiac being towed, surrounded by yellow tape, aired on evening news, heightening Dallas's fear. Whispers spread that Rebecca may have encountered foul play right after leaving the shop, forced out of her car, and then vanished. In the lab, every fingerprint and fiber was analyzed. Investigators hoped for a breakthrough lead to a suspect, but weeks passed with dim results. Unknown prints matched no one in the system. Fibers were common materials, untraceable. The car's interior was unusually clean, almost as if wiped down before being abandoned. In his report, Collins wrote, "Car found but offers no clear progress. No blood, no signs of violence, just suspicious silence." For him, it was both a step forward and a dead end. Rebecca's Pontiac became the case's sole key evidence. But it raised a haunting question: why was she gone, yet the car remained, an empty shell with no answers? As the community awaited updates, the Wrights endured sleepless nights. The Pontiac, once Rebecca's pride, now terrified them. The image of the empty, locked car without their daughter haunted them hourly. For the Dallas police, the case laid bare a harsh reality. A young woman could vanish in a bustling city, leaving only a car as a fragile clue and nothing more. The discovery of Rebecca's Pontiac Grand Am seemed poised to open a new path for the investigation, but it led Dallas police into a maze of conflicting accounts. As news of the abandoned car near Tennyson Park spread, calls flooded the station. Among them, 2 witnesses stood out, but their stories starkly contradicted each other. The first, Harold Bennett, a retired truck driver, reported an odd sight on the night of September 12th. Driving home on the road toward Garland, he noticed a black Pontiac ahead, closely tailed by a red pickup truck. Harold was certain because the pickup's headlights beamed directly into the Pontiac, forcing him to slow down to avoid trouble. "I swear that pickup was pressuring the other car," he said during his statement, voice firm. "I thought they'd crash." He described the pickup as an older Ford with a dent on the right rear door. But when police showed him photos of similar models, Harold grew hesitant, unsure of the exact make. In contrast to this account, another witness, a young woman named Allison Parker, insisted she saw Rebecca with someone else. Allison, a student at the University of North Texas, stated that on that night, she and her friends left a bar near Lower Greenville around 11:20 p.m. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, she noticed a familiar black Pontiac and through the window believed she saw Rebecca in the driver's seat with another girl in the passenger seat. "I recognized Rebecca's long brown hair," Allison said, "and I'm sure someone was with her. I think it was a female friend, but I couldn't see her face clearly." When pressed by police, Allison admitted she'd had a few beers that night, and the street lighting was dim, so her memory might not be accurate. These two accounts, placed side by side, further tangled the case file. If Harold was correct, Rebecca was being followed by a suspicious vehicle, possibly the perpetrator. But if Allison was right, Rebecca wasn't alone, and had someone with her, opening an entirely different line of inquiry. Lieutenant Collins noted in his report, "Possibility of faulty memory due to nighttime poor lighting or alcohol influence. Cannot rule out deliberate misinformation." Police decided to review traffic cameras along I-30 and around Lower Greenville, hoping to verify at least one of the accounts. But the 2004 camera systems were outdated, with grainy footage that couldn't capture license plates or faces inside vehicles. One clip near the bar showed a dark-colored car leaving around the time Allison mentioned, but it was too blurry to confirm as Rebecca's Pontiac. As for the red pickup Harold described, police checked dozens of similar vehicles registered in the area, but the sheer volume made it impossible to narrow down. Meanwhile, Dallas's community split into factions. Some believed Harold, seeing it as evidence Rebecca was chased by a stranger. Others sided with Allison, thinking Rebecca might have left the cafe with a friend, suggesting her disappearance wasn't necessarily a kidnapping but could involve someone she knew. Rumors spread quickly, with some maliciously claiming Rebecca had run away to start a new life, despite no evidence supporting this theory. For the Wright family, these conflicting accounts felt like a cruel jest. Linda wept upon hearing the police updates. If Rebecca was chased by a pickup, she must have been terrified in her final moments. If another girl was with her, why hadn't that person come forward? Robert tightly clutched the police file, his face rigid, silent. He knew the more information they received, the easier it was to get lost, and the truth about his daughter risked being buried in a sea of theories. When the media published these contradictory accounts, Dallas grew more anxious. The front page of the Dallas Morning News ran the headline, "Rebecca Wright, Chased or Not Alone." At the cafe where Rebecca worked, customers whispered, pointing at her usual empty chair. Stories were embellished and distorted, making it harder for police to separate real leads from mere echoes. After weeks of scrutiny, Collins temporarily concluded both accounts lacked sufficient reliability to be considered evidence, only noted as reference information. But for the Wrights, this meant they still had no explanation, only prolonged uncertainty. In the thick darkness enveloping Dallas, the question of what happened the night Rebecca vanished grew murkier, as if the truth was deliberately hiding, leaving a case full of contradictions and dead ends. These conflicting accounts cornered the Dallas police, making an already fragile investigation increasingly directionless. Despite analyzing every detail, the results were all dead ends. As days passed, calls from the community dwindled, and Rebecca Wright's name faded from headlines. This prolonged silence ushered in a colder phase. Rebecca's case officially slid into the cold case category. By 2010, after 6 years without progress, Rebecca's case was formally classified as a cold case. In the chilly archives of the Dallas Police Department, a file hundreds of pages thick was shelved, labeled Rebecca Wright, Missing Person, 2004. With it were the few sealed pieces of evidence: Rebecca's worn denim jacket, some hair strands mixed in the Pontiac's carpet, and a tiny dried bloodstain on the car door's edge, the only hint of a possible conflict. Though heartbroken, the Wright family refused to let their daughter's memory be buried with the file. They held annual candlelight vigils at their local church. Each time, Rebecca's photo at age 19 was placed solemnly on a wooden table, surrounded by white lilies and flickering candles. Linda Wright often spoke briefly, her voice hoarse with tears. "She's still out there somewhere. We'll never stop until we find Rebecca." These small vigils became a familiar ritual, not just for the family, but for the community, a reminder that the case remained unresolved. Dallas media, when given the chance, revisited Rebecca as a symbol of the city's unsolved disappearances. One reporter wrote, "Dallas holds secrets yet to be uncovered, and Rebecca Wright is one of them." But behind the somber headlines, the reality was stark. Police had no new evidence, no new witnesses, and the case sank into silence. For young investigators entering the field, Rebecca's file was a painful example. An abandoned car, a few messy fingerprints, some conflicting accounts, all insufficient for a criminal case, one officer recalled. They saw dozens of open-ended leads in the file, but knew without modern technology, they were just scattered pieces. In the Wright's small home, normalcy never returned. Rebecca's bed remained untouched. Her desk still held the textbooks she brought home. Robert, the father, often sat quietly in her room for hours, staring out the window as if waiting for her familiar figure. Linda kept a small candle by Rebecca's framed photo on a shelf, its light never fading. But the case's silence bred suspicion. Many in the community began questioning, had Dallas police done their best? Were there early mistakes that doomed the case? Though patient, the Wrights couldn't hide their simmering anger. They appeared more on media, highlighting overlooked details and leads they believed police should have pursued relentlessly. From these doubts, a new chapter began to form. As a veteran investigator neared retirement, he revisited Rebecca's file as a farewell to his career. In those weathered pages, he found overlooked details and missed opportunities from the start. When exposed, these errors would stun the community. While Rebecca Wright's file lay dormant in the cold case unit's chilly vault, the years that followed held only silence and the family's candlelit prayers. But occasionally, that silence was stirred by belated confessions. In 2011, during an interview with a local paper about Dallas's unsolved cases, retired Lieutenant Collins shocked listeners with a revelation. His voice raspy, he said, "If we had checked the I-30 traffic cameras in time, things might have been different." The night Rebecca vanished, a black Pontiac went that way, but the footage was blurry and we didn't extract it promptly. It was overwritten within days. That was an unforgivable mistake. Printed boldly on the Dallas Morning News front page, this confession reignited community outrage. The Wright family, long harboring frustration, publicly criticized the Dallas police for the first time. At a press conference, Robert spoke deliberately, "My daughter was taken, and now I learned things that should have been done from the start were ignored. You let those critical moments slip." Linda sobbed beside him, while Rebecca's sister held her photo, pointing at reporters' cameras. If the police had done their job, Rebecca might still be here today. Those words aired on TV, becoming a bitter indictment of the authorities. The mistakes weren't limited to traffic cameras. Later released documents revealed that the red pickup truck, reported by witness Harold Bennett in the first week, wasn't fully pursued. In a short memoir for the Police Association, Collins admitted, "We lacked manpower to check every red pickup registered in the area. There were hundreds, and as other leads emerged, we let this one go." In other words, a key clue that could have led to the perpetrator was abandoned due to exhaustion and lack of persistence. When this surfaced, Dallas erupted. Legal experts on TV called Rebecca's case a textbook example of a fledgling investigation derailed from the start. Evidence not thoroughly collected, cameras not promptly archived, witnesses overlooked. A cascade of errors, a former prosecutor said, resulting in a family's 20 years of suffering. The Wrights leveraged public outcry to demand reform. They wrote to the Dallas mayor's office, calling for an independent investigation into how police handled Rebecca's case. At the 2012 Candlelight Vigil, Roberts spoke to hundreds of residents and reporters. "My daughter wasn't just taken by someone out there. She was betrayed by this system. We won't stay silent." His words moved many to tears, and Rebecca's name returned to statewide news. Meanwhile, officers involved in the case felt defensive. Some stayed silent. Others defended Collins, noting that 2004 technology was limited and expectations shouldn't be too high. But these excuses didn't soothe the Wrights. To them, it wasn't technology but negligence that killed the chance to find Rebecca sooner. In the following years, Rebecca's case was featured in investigative training workshops as a cautionary tale. At a Texas Police Academy seminar, a professor stressed, "The Wright case teaches us never to overlook small details. A camera, a red pickup, seemingly trivial things could be the key to a case." Police students took notes, but outside, the Wrights endured an irreplaceable loss. Looking back, the years from 2004 to 2010 weren't just Rebecca's absence, but a time when opportunities were buried by errors and hesitation. Had the I-30 cameras not been missed, had the red pickup been pursued, the case might not have gone cold. Those what-ifs echoing through the years fueled the Wrights' anger in every conversation, vigil, and moment they spoke Rebecca's name to crowds. In the cold darkness of the archives, the RW 20040912 box sat still. But outside, public sentiment shifted. The case was no longer just a mystery but a symbol of investigative failure. For the Wrights, this harsh truth only strengthened their resolve to seek justice, though the path ahead remained as dim as the day Rebecca vanished. Nearly 2 decades after that fateful 2004 night, Rebecca Wright's file remained in the archives, its cover yellowed, seals crinkled like witnesses to prolonged futility. But in early 2023, a significant shift occurred. The Dallas Police Department formed a cold case unit to review old cases using modern forensic technology. When the list was announced, Rebecca Wright's name stood out like an unhealed wound. Lieutenant Karen Morales, leading the new unit, prioritized the case. At a press conference, she said simply, "It's time we restore justice to forgotten souls." In early February, the RW 20040912 box was retrieved from cold storage. Inside, Rebecca's faded denim jacket was removed, still sealed in clear nylon. Forensic technicians, with fresh gloves, handled it like a sacred relic. Tested in 2004 with limited results, the jacket now became a critical key. Using genetic genealogy, experts could analyze tiny DNA samples and cross-reference vast genealogical databases to find distant connections previously undetectable. The analysis spanned weeks. Sophisticated machines dissected molecules, building a detailed genetic profile. In a brightly lit lab, screens displayed number sequences and complex graphs only scientists could decipher. Then, one March afternoon, an email appeared on Morales' screen. Match found, possible relative identified. The unknown DNA on Rebecca's jacket matched a family branch named Jackson, living in Garland, northeast Dallas. When the DNA linked to the Jacksons in Garland, Mark Jackson's name quickly rose in the investigation. During a morning meeting at the cold case unit, Morales opened his civilian file, projecting a photo of the now 45-year-old man. Mark Jackson, a construction engineer, lived with his wife and 2 children in a quiet Garland neighborhood. On the surface, he was a model citizen, no criminal record, clean work history, described by neighbors as a quiet, kind man who occasionally helped with chores. These benign descriptions seemed harmless but explained why he'd stayed off the radar for nearly 20 years. But as investigators dug deeper, pieces began fitting like a puzzle. In 2004, Jackson rented an apartment just blocks from the cafe where Rebecca worked. Lease records confirmed he lived there from 2002 to 2005, perfectly overlapping with Rebecca's disappearance. More strikingly, Texas vehicle records showed Jackson owned an older red Ford pickup, sold in 2007. This silenced the meeting room, as it matched Harold Bennett's account of the red pickup tailing the Pontiac that night. Morales ordered a deeper probe into Jackson's 2004 activities. Records showed he worked at a mid-sized Dallas construction firm, starting early mornings and ending late afternoons. No reports indicated violence or trouble, but a former coworker, when contacted, recalled Jackson often sat alone during breaks, staring intently at those around him. He never caused trouble, but something about him made me uneasy, the coworker said. Jackson's family was also vetted. His wife Claire, a school teacher, described him as quiet but thoughtful. Their 2 children, born after 2006, meant Rebecca vanished before Jackson started his family. This inadvertently bolstered his harmless image, a devoted family man uninvolved in anything but work and kids. But to investigators, the gap between today's Mark and 2004's Mark was a chilling void to fill. They revisited reports from the cafe. Witness Maria had mentioned a gray-haired middle-aged man who frequented the corner and once argued heatedly with Rebecca. When shown an enlarged 2004 photo of Jackson, Maria said his face seemed familiar, though she wasn't 100% certain. For Morales, this familiarity was enough to tie loose threads. The man seen as harmless by the community might have been the one facing Rebecca in her final days. To strengthen the case, the Cold Case Unit contacted the DMV for Jackson's 2007 vehicle sale records. The red Ford pickup was sold to a small scrapyard in the suburbs. When investigators visited, old records were lost and the truck had long been dismantled. But a copy of the registration, still bearing the state's seal, confirmed Jackson owned a vehicle matching the witness's description. This was no mere coincidence. In an internal report, Morales wrote, "Mark Jackson, 45, construction engineer, is a potential suspect. No criminal record, no history of violence, but residence, vehicle ownership, and indirect DNA match align. Requires close monitoring and further direct evidence." The team knew they were on a tightrope. Jackson had lived freely for nearly 20 years, now with a family and community reputation. One wrong move could collapse the case. Meanwhile, the Wright family was given partial updates. Morales cautiously told them a new suspect had emerged, but withheld details. Linda listened through tears, feeling anger and hope surge together. If he lived so close, why didn't anyone see? She asked. Robert stayed silent, head bowed, hands clenched white. In Garland, Jackson's neighbors remained unaware. They saw him mowing his lawn on weekends, driving his kids to school, greeting politely on the street. None imagined this ordinary man was the Dallas police's prime suspect in a case haunting the city for nearly 2 decades. That paradox both unnerved and drove investigators. A face so ordinary could mask a crime. As Jackson's file grew, the Cold Case Unit knew they'd reached the heart of the mystery. The question was no longer who, but how to prove it. The answer, they understood, lay in careful next steps: surveillance, direct DNA collection, and preparing for the first major strike after nearly 20 years of waiting. After Mark Jackson's file was analyzed and flagged as high priority, the Cold Case Unit moved to a sensitive phase: covert surveillance. Morales knew every action had to be discreet, as Jackson could destroy remaining evidence or flee if he sensed he was being watched. A meticulous plan was set. 3 teams of investigators rotated 24/7 surveillance at Jackson's quiet Garland neighborhood, with tidy lawns and tree-lined streets. The first week, officers parked unmarked cars at the street's edge, blending with local traffic. They watched Jackson leave for work early mornings, return late afternoons, sometimes drive his kids to school or shop with his wife. Surveillance footage of him mowing his lawn, chatting amiably with neighbors, or smiling while walking his dog made it hard to believe he could be linked to a young woman's disappearance nearly 2 decades ago. But to the investigators, this ordinary facade only strengthened their belief he'd hidden well. To obtain definitive evidence, they needed a direct DNA sample from Jackson. The law allowed collection of items discarded in public, and that was the strategy Morales chose. On the Thursday evening of the second week, a surveillance team saw Jackson place a trash bag on the curb as usual. After he went back inside, investigators quietly collected the bag and sent it to the lab. Inside, they found empty beer cans, an old discarded toothbrush, and a tissue with a small blood stain from a cut. These were a forensic treasure trove. In Dallas's forensic lab, technicians carefully extracted samples from the toothbrush and beer cans. After hours of analysis, the results reached Morales. The report's bolded line read, "Match, 100% consistency with unknown male DNA from Rebecca Wright's denim jacket." The room fell silent. Morales sat quietly for a moment before saying, "We've got him." After 19 years, the anonymous DNA that haunted investigators had finally found its owner, Mark Jackson. To be certain, another forensic team was tasked with cross-verification. They compared DNA from the beer can to the toothbrush, then to the sealed sample from Rebecca's file. The results were unequivocal, a perfect match. There was no room for doubt. Mark Jackson had direct contact with Rebecca's jacket the night she vanished, evidence so strong it was undeniable. However, Morales didn't let excitement cloud her judgment. She knew DNA was just the starting point, insufficient for prosecution without a complete picture. She reminded the team, "Don't forget we've made mistakes in this case before. Forensic evidence is our backbone, but we need witnesses, a timeline, a motive. Without them, defense attorneys will tear us apart." Her words silenced the room but also rallied the team. They were closer to the truth than ever. Throughout the third week, surveillance continued. Officers meticulously logged Jackson's daily routines, places he visited, people he met. Nothing stood out: work, home, grocery shopping. But each note built a fuller profile. One night, in a surveillance van, a young officer remarked, "It's hard to believe the guy dropping his kids off at school could have killed Rebecca." His colleague replied, "That's exactly why he's evaded us for nearly 20 years. When the DNA report was presented to superiors, the Dallas Police Department officially named Mark Jackson the prime suspect in Rebecca Wright's case. Morales sent a summary to the prosecutor's office, emphasizing the irrefutable genetic evidence matching the 2004 artifact. Prosecutor Martinez, seasoned with tough cases, read it and said, "This is the first brick in the wall of justice. Now we must build it strong." In his quiet Garland home, Mark Jackson remained unaware that the net was tightening. He still walked his dog, greeted neighbors with a smile, ate dinner with his wife and kids. But outside, determined eyes watched, hands flipped through case files, and in the archives, Rebecca's denim jacket was no longer a silent relic, but a voice from the past, pointing directly at the man who hid his crime for nearly 2 decades. With the DNA perfectly matching the jacket, the cold case unit knew they'd reached the case's heart. But Morales stressed in an urgent meeting, a DNA report alone won't hold up in court. We need the other pieces: testimonies, memories, overlooked human details. Otherwise, the defense will shred this case. With that directive, the team began revisiting old witnesses from the 2004 file, those left behind when the case went cold. Their first stop was a small house in suburban Denton, home to Sarah Mitchell, Rebecca's college classmate. Sarah, 19 then and now in her 30s, was a high school teacher. When 2 investigators knocked, she hesitated before inviting them in, her eyes flashing with pain at hearing Rebecca Wright's name. "I remember clearly," Sarah began, voice trembling. "Before Rebecca disappeared, she complained about a middle-aged man lingering outside the cafe. He never came in to buy anything, just stood on the sidewalk, staring inside. Once, Rebecca told me, his gaze gives me the creeps. Sarah admitted she didn't take it seriously then, thinking he was just a vagrant. But now, shown a photo of a younger Mark Jackson, Sarah froze, hand over mouth. My God, that's him, I'm sure. Next, police visited former neighbors from Jackson's 2004 apartment area. Dorothy Hughes, now in her 70s, recalled the young neighbor. He was polite, always nodded hello, but I noticed he often walked toward Lower Greenville late at night, Dorothy said. I wondered why a young engineer hung around a student cafe area, but no one paid much attention. When asked for specifics, Dorothy nodded slowly. He had a red pickup truck, loud engine, woke the whole street when he started it. This matched the old report and Harold Bennett's testimony. Not only Dorothy, but another middle-aged man from the same apartment complex remembered Jackson as lonely and odd. He said, "Once, I passed by and saw him staring at a missing person poster of Rebecca. Stood there a long time, silent. When I approached, he turned and walked away fast, like he was avoiding me." This detail never made the 2004 file, as no one thought a neighbor mattered. Now, in new light, it was chilling. Jackson wasn't just a passerby, but seemed haunted by the case he created. These new statements were recorded, signed, and added to the file. Morales read each line, underlining matches. The staring man outside the cafe, frequenting Lower Greenville, the red pickup, unusual interest in the disappearance. "It's no longer random," she said in a meeting. "We have DNA, and now witness testimonies painting the portrait of a perpetrator." The Wright family was briefed on these developments. Linda sat silently as investigators recounted Sarah Mitchell recognizing Jackson's photo. Tears streamed as she said, "My daughter was scared. She knew something was wrong, and we couldn't protect her." Robert rested a hand on her shoulder, eyes down, but a glint of cold resolve shone through. The truth was one step closer, and he wouldn't stop until justice was complete. In Dallas, these updates stayed under wraps, but the team knew they were building a solid case. Each testimony and memory aligned with forensic evidence, tightening the circle around Mark Jackson. From a kind neighbor, he emerged as a silent predator, living unnoticed in plain sight. For the cold case unit, the quest for Rebecca's justice entered an irreversible phase. The past was speaking, confronting the man who tried to bury it for nearly 20 years. With the timeline fully reconstructed with chilling precision, the cold case unit knew they'd reached the final step, securing an arrest warrant for Mark Jackson. On a dreary morning at the Dallas courthouse, Prosecutor Martinez presented the evidence chain to the judge: perfect DNA match from Rebecca's jacket, witness testimonies about the middle-aged man in red pickup, and traffic camera footage proving Jackson trailed the Pontiac minutes before the girl vanished. Martinez's voice was firm, eyes sharp. "We believe Rebecca Wright fell into Mark Jackson's hands, and he's hidden the truth for nearly 20 years. It's time justice speaks." The judge silently reviewed the thick file, then nodded and signed the most powerful document, the official arrest warrant. The news spread quickly through the Dallas Police Department. Morales held the warrant, feeling its weight and liberation. But she knew this was just the start of a new battle. "Don't forget, he's lived free for nearly 2 decades, she reminded the team. "We don't know what he's prepared to cover his tracks. If he feels cornered, he might destroy any remaining evidence at home." So instead of a standard arrest, Morales opted to coordinate with the SWAT team for absolute safety. That afternoon, in a small meeting room, the SWAT team gathered around a map of Jackson's Garland neighborhood. A photo of his house was projected, a 2-story red brick home with a front garage and a small fenced backyard. SWAT Captain Simmons pointed to key spots: main entrance, garage door, back door. "He has a dog in the yard, we'll handle it. You'll cover the sides. The goal is quick containment, no chance for him to burn documents, destroy hard drives, or discard evidence." Morales watched quietly, noting every detail. In her mind flashed the sealed denim jacket, Linda Wright's tears, and Robert's determined gaze at the Pontiac pickup video. She knew the family had waited too long, and any slip now was unforgivable. "Don't give him a chance," she told Simmons. "Not even a second." Night fell, the precinct taut with tension. Officers donned bulletproof vests, checked guns, earpiece mics, and flashlights. Armored vehicles roared to life in the lot, red and blue lights reflecting off glass. Martinez was there, watching the team prepare, then whispered to Morales, "When he's cuffed, remember, it's only half the journey. A long trial lies ahead." Morales nodded, but her eyes held a cold gleam. Tonight, Mark Jackson would lose the freedom he'd held too long. In Garland, Jackson's house glowed as usual. Neighbors were oblivious that in hours, the calm would shatter. Jackson sat in his living room, TV on a sports channel, his dog on the porch, wife and kids upstairs. He didn't know that outside, in the dark, armored vehicles had silently taken over surrounding streets. Black-clad figures moved like shadows, positioning as planned. On the internal comms, Simmons' voice rang firm. "All ready. We move at 23 o'clock. Morales stood at the rear, watching the clock tick. In her mind was Rebecca's face from old flyers, her bright eyes now just a memory. She whispered, "We'll bring justice back for you." As the clock struck 23 o'clock, Garland's quiet streets shook with armored vehicle engines and flashing red-blue lights bathing red brick walls. The front door of 1447, Mark Jackson's home, was smashed open by specialized equipment. A dog barked frantically, house lights flared, and a woman's scream echoed out. In seconds, SWAT stormed in. Mark Jackson, in a gray t-shirt and sweatpants, stepped into the hallway as flashlights hit his face. Before he could grasp the situation, 2 officers pinned him, wrenching his arms behind his back. The cold click of handcuffs echoed through the once familiar home. His wife, Claire, rushed downstairs in panic, clutching her crying children. "What's happening? You've got the wrong man," she screamed. An officer held her back, calmly stating, "We have an arrest warrant. Please step aside." Jackson struggled, face twisted in anger and shock. "I didn't do anything. You can't arrest me like this," he shouted. But SWAT was accustomed to such scenes. Morales stepped in, weaponless, holding the warrant. She looked straight at Jackson, voice calm but icy. "Mark Jackson, you're under arrest for the suspected murder of Rebecca Wright in 2004. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court." Her words sliced through the kind man facade Jackson had worn for nearly 20 years. The commotion spilled outside. Neighbors, used to seeing a quiet engineer and devoted father, stood frozen on their lawns, witnessing the horrifying scene. An elderly woman trembled, asking, "How could he be involved?" "He fixed my fence last week." Another shook their head, eyes fixed on Jackson being led to the armored vehicle, whispering, "We lived next to a killer for 20 years, and didn't know." Police quickly established a security perimeter, but they couldn't stop the flood of reporters' cameras and lenses from news outlets rushing to the scene. The news had leaked earlier. Dallas police prepare to arrest suspect in 2004 disappearance case. As Jackson was escorted across the lawn, camera flashes erupted, and questions bombarded him. "Did you kill Rebecca Wright? Why is he silent? Does his family know anything?" Jackson kept his head down, hair disheveled, hands tightly cuffed, his sneakers soaked with nighttime dew. The media exploded with shocking headlines. "Quiet engineer arrested in 20-year-old case." The Dallas Morning News, Fox 4 News, and even CNN covered the story, emphasizing that the suspect lived an ordinary life with no criminal record, but was accused of involvement in one of Dallas's most haunting mysteries. Urgent reports highlighted neighbors' accounts of a man who never raised his voice, always nodded politely on the street. This stark contrast fueled the shock. A seemingly kind figure could conceal a brutal crime. Inside the armored vehicle, Jackson sat silent, breathing heavily. His wrists bore cuff marks, sweat beading on his forehead. Morales sat across from him, eyes fixed on the suspect. She didn't need to hear familiar denials, as the evidence, DNA, cameras, witness accounts, formed an unyielding noose. Her goal now was to bring Jackson into the light so the Wright family could finally see justice after 20 years of waiting. At the Dallas police station, news of Jackson's arrest was immediately relayed to the Wright family. Linda broke into sobs upon hearing the call. They got him? After all these years, Robert sat silently, hand trembling on his forehead. He didn't smile or speak, only shed tears, pent up for 2 decades, now finding release. That night, Dallas erupted. Social media buzzed with thousands of comments. Can't believe he was right there all along. Justice for Rebecca finally. I lived near him, chilling to think about. TV stations set up outside Jackson's house, where the broken gate and SWAT boot prints on the lawn became the opening images of national broadcasts. For the Dallas police, the successful operation was a historic milestone. Morales stood at a podium the next morning, behind a sign reading "Cold Case No More." Her voice was resolute. "We've arrested Mark Jackson on charges of murdering Rebecca Wright in 2004. DNA evidence, traffic cameras, and witnesses all support the case. This proves justice is never lost, only delayed." But even in that triumphant moment, no one forgot this was just the start of a long road. Ahead lay intense interrogations, fiery trials, and most crucially, the truth about where Rebecca was buried remained unexposed. That night, under glaring lights, the image of Mark Jackson handcuffed before his wife and children etched itself into Dallas's memory as a turning point. The man who lived as a kind, decent neighbor was finally exposed. And the city, along with the Wright family, knew a new chapter in the case had begun. After the shocking arrest in Garland, Mark Jackson was taken to Dallas Police Headquarters under tight security. The city stayed awake with continuous news updates, but inside the interrogation room, the air was thick with silence. Harsh, fluorescent light bathed the cold metal table. 2 chairs faced each other, and Jackson sat there, rumpled t-shirt, messy hair, hands clasped tightly, as if clinging to dwindling composure. Across from him were Morales and Lieutenant Daniels, armed with a thick file. As the interrogation began, Jackson immediately declared, "I don't know who Rebecca Wright is. You've got the wrong guy." His voice was hoarse, but his eyes darted away. His court-appointed lawyer quickly intervened. "My client will exercise his right to remain silent. Without direct evidence, this interrogation must stop." Morales stayed calm, placing old photos on the table. A missing person flyer of Rebecca, the abandoned Pontiac, and notably, her sealed denim jacket. "You say you don't know her?" she asked, voice low but firm. "Then explain why your DNA is on her jacket from the night she vanished in 2004. Jackson faltered, hands tightening, but kept his tone even. "I don't know. Maybe a mistake. Maybe the jacket touched someone else and got contaminated." Daniels slid forward a forensic report. "No mistake, Mark. We cross-checked twice. DNA from the beer can and toothbrush you threw out last month matches the jacket perfectly. No coincidence. You were with her, and you know what happened." The lawyer demanded a halt, but Morales didn't miss a beat. She shifted gears, displaying restored footage from an I-30 traffic camera. The blurry light showed Rebecca's Pontiac leaving the cafe at 11:15 p.m., followed 2 minutes later by an older red pickup. "You owned a 90s red Ford," Morales said, eyes locked on Jackson. "DMV records confirm it. This is you tailing her. How do you explain that?" Jackson froze, swallowing hard, glancing at his lawyer for support. The lawyer reiterated his right to silence, but the pressure was wearing Jackson down. Daniels pressed, "No Harold Bennett?" He saw a red pickup crowding a Pontiac to the curb. "And Maria, the cafe worker, she remembers you arguing with Rebecca before she disappeared. Everything points to you, Mark." The room grew stifling. Jackson leaned back, breathing heavily, hand rubbing his forehead. He stopped loudly denying, whispering, I don't remember. Maybe you're setting me up." Morales leaned forward, voice sharp as a blade. "No one's setting you up. For 20 years, you lived as a model husband and father, while Rebecca lay in cold ground somewhere. Did you think you could hide forever? DNA doesn't lie. Cameras don't lie. You were there that night. Silence stretched for nearly a minute, only the clocks ticking audible. Then Jackson slowly shook his head, eyes fixed on the floor. I don't want to talk. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder, stopping any further admissions. But Morales and Daniels saw the flicker in his eyes and demeanor. He was no longer certain, his initial firm denials cracking. As the session paused, Morales stepped out, exhaling as if leaving a battlefield. She knew Jackson hadn't confessed, but cracks had appeared. He was shaken, unable to hide his fear as evidence piled up. He'll break, Morales told Daniels, eyes resolute. We just need more time and pressure. The truth is within reach. The next morning's interrogation room was the same cold space with harsh white light, but the atmosphere had shifted. Jackson looked haggard, eyes sunken from a sleepless night. He sat hunched, hands trembling, no longer defiant. Morales entered with a new file, sitting silently. She placed the sealed denim jacket photo before him, then replayed the restored timeline video. No words were needed. The Pontiac and red pickup trailing on I-30 stood as an inescapable accusation. Daniels said curtly. No way out, Mark. Jackson took a deep breath, staring at the table, then muttered, as if to himself. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Morales seized the moment. Tell us. Her family deserves to know. They've lived in darkness for years while you had a cozy life with your wife and kids. Is that fair? Her words shattered Jackson's last defenses. After a heavy pause, he began, voice hoarse. That night, I saw her leave work. I followed, just wanted to talk, but she got scared. I forced her car to the curb. We argued. She screamed. I lost control. He stopped, hands clutching his head, as if the memory tormented him. When I realized what happened, I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I drove her Pontiac away, and the rest, his voice choked, then whispered, I took her to an abandoned field near Lake Ray Hubbard. I left everything there. The room fell silent. Morales stayed composed, but her heart tightened. Daniels pressed Jackson to describe the exact location. He spoke of a narrow dirt road by the lake, leading to an abandoned farm from the 80s, now just weeds and rotting posts. There was a big tree. I dug a hole under it, he said, eyes vacant. Every word was recorded, signed, and sent to forensics. That afternoon, a convoy of police vehicles headed to Lake Ray Hubbard, east of Dallas. The desolate fields stretched endlessly, whipped by wind, red dirt cracked and dry. Forensics set up white tents, yellow tape, encircling the area Jackson described. Metal detectors, shovels, and K9 units were deployed. Each shovel struck the earth, lifting red dirt, the air thick with anticipation. Then a shout. Got something. A small bone fragment emerged from the hard soil, pale under the Texas sun. The area held its breath. Forensics carefully excavated, revealing a nearly intact human skeleton. On a finger was a small silver necklace, tarnished, but with a heart-shaped pendant engraved with R. Nearby, a woman's canvas shoe, pale blue, caked in dirt but intact. These artifacts confirmed the identity. They were Rebecca's. When the news reached the Wright family, their home filled with sobs. Linda collapsed upon hearing remains. Robert steadied her, eyes bloodshot but voice calm as he asked, Is it really her? Hearing about the necklace and shoe, he buried his face in his hands, a father's rare tears breaking free after 2 decades. Rebecca's sister clutched her photo, sobbing. At least we brought her home. The media erupted. That evening, every Dallas channel reported, shocking confession, suspect reveals Rebecca Wright's burial site after 20 years. Images of forensic tents, sealed bags with remains and belongings, flooded screens. Reporters commented, this is the final turning point. After 20 years, Dallas has answers. For the cold case unit, finding the remains was the strongest proof. Morales stood by the site, watching evidence bags loaded onto vehicles, whispering, Rebecca, you're finally home. She knew a long trial lay ahead, but the truth was no longer buried. For the Wrights, this pain was both heart-wrenching and liberating. They'd lost Rebecca forever, but the questions that haunted them were answered. The candle they lit yearly now guided their daughter home. And Dallas, carrying an unhealed wound for 2 decades, finally heard the resolution to its haunting mystery. After Rebecca Wright's remains were found in the desolate field by Lake Ray Hubbard, Dallas erupted in shock. For police and the community, the truth was revealed, but for the legal system, it was only the start of another grueling battle, bringing Mark Jackson to justice. Prosecutor Miguel Martinez, seasoned with long-standing cases, took charge of building the prosecution. In a brightly lit meeting room, he spread out the thick file, voice calm but resolute. "We have a perfect DNA match, a confession, the victim's remains and artifacts. This is a strong case, but don't forget, the defense will attack every gap, especially Jackson's confession." Martinez divided the case into 3 pillars. First, scientific evidence, Jackson's DNA on Rebecca's jacket, verified by 2 independent labs. Second, the interrogation confession. Despite a lawyer's presence, Jackson detailed forcing the car, causing her death, and hiding the body. Third, most crucially, the remains and personal items, the silver necklace with R and blue canvas shoes, matching the Wright's 2004 descriptions. These 3 pieces, Martinez said, formed an unbreakable picture. But the defense team quickly countered. At the preliminary hearing, lead attorney Harvey Blake declared, "My client was coerced under prolonged, exhausting interrogation. His confession wasn't voluntary." Blake stressed no direct witness saw Jackson attack Rebecca. The footage shows only vehicles, not people. Witnesses' memories are vague or faded by time. This case is built on assumptions, not facts. These arguments sparked heated legal debates. Dallas TV channels analyzed overnight. The prosecution had a tight case, but the defense wasn't weak, targeting the confession's legality and lack of direct witnesses. A veteran journalist remarked, "This won't be an easy case. The public believes Jackson's guilty, but juries need more than belief, undeniable proof." The Wright family, despite their pain, stood firmly with the prosecution. Linda and Robert appeared at a press conference beside Martinez. Linda's voice trembled. "For 20 years, we've waited for this moment. Rebecca deserves justice. We believe justice will prevail." Their image dominated headlines, amplifying public focus. Major outlets ran headlines. "Dallas's trial of the century looms, from quiet engineer to murder suspect. What truth will win?" National TV detailed everything, from the SWAT arrest to the remains excavation. Public opinion split. Most believed Jackson guilty, but some, swayed by Blake's strategy, questioned if police coerced a confession or staged a narrative. In the cold case unit, Morales and the team worked tirelessly to solidify the case. They reviewed every interrogation record, ensuring legal compliance. Jackson was read his Miranda rights. A lawyer was present. No force or coercion used. Morales stated bluntly, he confessed not because he was coerced, but because the truth weighed on him. "We must prove that in court." In May 2024, the trial date was set. Dallas held its breath. Outside the county courthouse, TV vans lined up, barriers controlled crowds. People held candles and Rebecca's photos, a reminder that this trial was for a family and a community haunted for 20 years. In the prosecution's prep room, Martinez closed the thick file, took a deep breath and told colleagues, "Tomorrow we're not just trying Mark Jackson, we're trying 20 years of torment, grief, and injustice the Wrights endured. Don't forget, we represent a girl who can't speak for herself." On May 6, 2024, Mark Jackson's trial began at the Dallas County Courthouse. The atmosphere outside was historic. Dozens of news vans packed the square. Reporters jostled with microphones, and crowds held candles and Rebecca's photos in silent vigil. Inside, the largest courtroom was chosen to accommodate the jury, media, and both families. Linda and Robert Wright sat in the front row, eyes red but resolute, staring at Jackson, who sat at the defendant's table, hands clasped, face cold. Prosecutor Miguel Martinez took the podium first. He opened briefly, without preamble. This isn't just a murder case, it's a story of justice stolen for 20 years. But today, we have evidence, we have truth, and we will bring Rebecca Wright back through the voice of justice. His voice echoed in the silent room, each word deliberate and sharp. Martinez started with the strongest pillar, DNA. He displayed forensic reports on a large screen, explaining how Jackson's DNA from discarded beer cans and a toothbrush matched the sample on Rebecca's 2004 jacket. The result is a perfect match. Not 90%, not 99%, but 100%. He stressed, holding up documents stamped by 2 independent labs. This means Mark Jackson's hands touched the jacket Rebecca wore on her last night alive. Next, he presented physical evidence, items found with Rebecca's remains near Lake Ray Hubbard. On screen, the silver necklace with R appeared, followed by the blue canvas shoes, laces tarnished but intact. Martinez faced the jury. The Wright family confirmed these as Rebecca's. They lay beside remains DNA matched to her parents. There's no doubt this is Rebecca. And Mark Jackson's confession led us to this place. Then, he outlined the timeline, meticulously reconstructed with modern technology. Restored I-30 camera footage played repeatedly, 11:15 p.m. Rebecca's black Pontiac left the cafe at 11:17 p.m. An older red Ford pickup trailed. Martinez froze the frame on the pickup. This is Mark Jackson's truck. DMV records confirm he owned a red 90s Ford at the time. We have witness Harold Bennett, who saw a red pickup crowding a Pontiac on the road. Every piece fits not by chance. Witness Bennett took the stand. The white-haired man, voice steady despite his 70s, said, "I remember that night clearly," looking at the jury. The red pickup's headlights beamed into the Pontiac, tailing so close I feared a crash. Shown a photo of Jackson's old Ford, he nodded firmly. Exactly like that. Maria, the former cafe worker, also testified, confirming Jackson's heated argument with Rebecca days before her disappearance. That story, nearly 20 years old, became a vital piece. Martinez summed up, DNA, physical evidence, timeline, witnesses. All point to one man, Mark Jackson. Not assumptions, not coincidence, but undeniable truth. Facing the jury, his voice rang, "Evidence doesn't lie. Rebecca Wright can't stand here to tell her story. But these items, DNA drops, and witnesses speak for her." Defense attorney Harvey Blake rose, in a dark suit, face stern. He began, "Ladies and gentlemen, don't let emotion override truth. We're discussing a 20-year-old case. Evidence can degrade, memories fade. DNA, yes, it matches. But can anyone prove when or how my client's DNA got on that jacket? No one." His confession, given after hours of exhausting interrogation under mental strain, and witnesses they recall after 2 decades. Is human memory that reliable? The jury listened tensely. Blake continued, "Mark Jackson is an engineer, a father. No criminal record, no violence. No one thought him a killer. Yet today, the prosecution builds a narrative on assumptions and hazy memories. Justice demands certainty, not emotion." Martinez remained composed. He countered, "This isn't a narrative, this is science, truth unearthed after 20 years. Rebecca's necklace doesn't lie. The bones at Lake Ray Hubbard don't lie. And the DNA, the only genetic trace, points to the man sitting there." He pointed at Jackson, making the room hold its breath. All day, the jury absorbed every word, detail. They reviewed DNA reports, excavation photos, interrogation records. Each piece was an arrow, all aimed at Jackson. Outside, media updated minute by minute, headlines dense, Rebecca Wright trial, DNA and forensics tighten noose on suspect. As the court recessed, Linda Wright stepped out, eyes red but voice firm. "We believe the jury will see what we've seen for 20 years. Mark Jackson took our daughter." Her words, broadcast live, chilled millions. The trial wasn't over, but the weight of forensic evidence left the jury with one choice: believe science and truth, or believe it was all an impossible coincidence. The Rebecca Wright trial spanned nearly 3 weeks, with dozens of witnesses and hundreds of pages of evidence presented to the jury. The atmosphere in Dallas was so tense that each morning hundreds of residents gathered outside the courthouse just to hear the latest updates. Then, on a sweltering afternoon in late May 2024, the jury returned to the courtroom after nearly 2 days of closed deliberations. The large room fell silent as the judge asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" The jury foreperson stood, voice clear. "We find the defendant Mark Jackson guilty of first-degree murder." Whispers erupted across the courtroom. Linda Wright clung to her husband, sobbing uncontrollably, her shoulders shaking after nearly 20 years of waiting for this day. Robert sat beside her, hands clenched white, tears silently streaming down his cheeks. Rebecca's sister, for the first time, could cry out in relief. "Justice for my sister. It's finally here." The family sat there, weeping and smiling, as if shedding the burden that had weighed on them for so long. Jackson sat motionless at the defendant's table, face pale. As the sentence was read, life imprisonment without parole, his eyes briefly closed, a slight nod signaling he finally understood. The game was over. Attorney Blake placed a hand on his client's shoulder, but said nothing. No argument could counter the DNA, physical evidence, and Jackson's own confession about where he hid the body. Outside the courthouse, the media exploded. Headlines flashed across every channel: Mark Jackson, quiet engineer, devoted father, sentenced to life in Rebecca Wright murder. After 20 years, Dallas reeled. Neighbors, who once praised Jackson as a kind man who always helped out, couldn't believe they'd lived beside a killer. "He fixed my fence," one told a reporter, face ashen. "Who'd have thought he killed that girl?" Legal experts commented on TV, "This is a victory for forensic science and the victim's family's perseverance." DNA, timeline, witnesses, every piece came together to bring the perpetrator to light. An SMU law professor noted, "This trial will be studied as a textbook case of how cold cases can be solved with genetic genealogy." In Dallas that evening, hundreds of candles were lit, not just in desperate prayer, but to honor Rebecca with the solace that justice had answered. At the city square, people placed flowers and photos of the 19-year-old, her gentle face and bright eyes, a reminder that Rebecca would never be forgotten. After the trial, the Wright family returned to their small suburban home, where Rebecca's photo still hung in the living room. Linda gazed at it, whispering, "You're home, Rebecca." Robert stood behind, arms around his wife, both crying in bitter relief. They couldn't have their daughter back, but they knew the truth, and she'd been brought back from the darkness. Rebecca Wright's story closed with a harsh sentence for Mark Jackson, but its echoes lingered in Dallas. It wasn't just a case of a missing and murdered girl, but a reminder of investigative flaws, the extraordinary persistence of a victim's family, and the power of modern science to illuminate truth. 20 years of waiting and pain ended with an answer, allowing the community to breathe as Rebecca was brought home. This journey left profound lessons for American society today. Initial mistakes, like Dallas police overlooking I-30 traffic camera data or failing to pursue the red pickup described by witness Harold Bennett, show how a single missed detail can delay justice for decades. Had those clues been taken seriously in 2004, the Wrights might not have endured 20 years of despair. This is a warning that law enforcement must invest in technology, training, and accountability to avoid missing golden hours of investigation. Simultaneously, the case underscores forensic science's power. In 2023, a tiny DNA trace on Rebecca's jacket unmasked the perpetrator. With thousands of cold cases still open in the U.S., this isn't just an option but a moral duty. Above all, the story highlights the Wright family's and community's resilience. Over 2 decades, they kept candles burning, refusing to let Rebecca's memory fade, and their persistence forced the system to revisit the case. The lesson is clear. In the face of injustice, determination and community spirit can turn faint hope into reality. In a vast country like the U.S., where justice sometimes arrives late, Rebecca Wright's case reminds us that justice may be delayed, but with relentless fight, it never vanishes. If the 20-year journey for justice for Rebecca Wright moved you, subscribe to the channel to stay updated on other cold case stories. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video as we continue uncovering truths buried in the shadows.